Hi, I'm Kurt Doolittle for the Proprietarian Institute. This is just one of my thoughts. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Antifa and the fact that it's not anti-fascist, it's simply pro-communist, and this is a bit of a distraction from their core purpose. So the correct answer is that Antifa is a pro-communist organization with pro-Marxist, pro-communist, pro-anarchist designs. The question is, why are the Antifa pro-communist, pro-Marxist, and pro-anarchist in the first place? Well, we know the answer. Next, Marxism, communism, socialism, neo-Marxism, postmodernism, and anti-male feminism, and the PC woke, anti-colonial, anti-whiteness, white replacement, and white genocide. That's the evolution of their history. All those movements in the one left movement constitute an intentional, organized, total war against all institutions and markets of cultural production. But why do they conduct that war against all institutions of cultural production? Well, we know the answer. The left, again, consisting of, and I'm going to use this repetition over and over again, Marxism, communism, socialism, neo-Marxism, postmodernism, anti-male feminism, PC woke, anti-European, anti-colonial, anti-whiteness, anti-white genocide. That movement used the opportunity created by the Industrial Revolution to change the Abrahamic, meaning the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, supernatural false promise of A, freedom from realism, naturalism, and logic, in other words, freedom from reason, freedom from physical scarcity, freedom from behavioral amorality, reciprocity, and kin preference, and freedom from evolutionary mutation load, regression to the mean, natural selection, and the race against time, and the Red Queen, that they all proposed you would get after death. They changed that into a pseudo-scientific false promise of freedom from those same limitations of material reality after the revolution. And the left claimed that these underclasses were oppressed rather than reproduced at rates greater than their productivity could provide for, given the costs of maintaining the military, economic, financial, traditional, normative commons they depend on. Now, the left is essentially claiming that by claiming that they can violate these laws and blaming whites for those laws, they're effectively claiming that whites are gods by blaming them for God's laws rather than for being gods or imitating gods for having discovered, adapted to, and applied those laws of the universe. Yet every other civilization failed and instead invented a network of lies to evade those laws, and that's why those civilizations all stagnated, declined, or failed for having done so. So Antifa is a radical Marxist leftist organization justifying its existence by claiming it's anti-fascist when the only reason for the existence of fascism is to prevent Marxist total war against the institutions of cultural production of Western civilization. So Antifa, the left's, the communist strategy is to claim that European civilization, that civilized the world by dragging mankind kicking and screaming against its will out of superstition, ignorance, poverty, hard labor, starvation, disease, suffering, child mortality, early death, and frankly the victimization by nature. Well, we're oppressive. The whites are oppressive for having done that. Or more simply, the left just hates European civilizations because they most discovered, adapted to, and applied the laws of the universe. And the reason's simple, because they're frankly unfit for those laws of the universe. Not because man says so, not because white people say so or whiteness says so, but because the physics of the universe says so. That's the problem. Humans cooperate using markets and association, cooperation, production, reproduction, the production of commons, polities, and even war. We develop the institutions of the family, of norm, tradition, religion, education, and law to intergenerationally transfer our group strategy. The European group strategy is the only one that didn't fail to discover, adapt to, and apply the use of the laws of the universe, and then deliver the science, technology, medicine, and knowledge to the world by having done so. And we did it in just a few generations in each of the Bronze, Iron, and Steel Ages. So fascism uses total war to defend its markets, its institutions of cultural production, from Marxist, now Marxist, homo, anti-white, total war against those institutions. There's no reason whatsoever to tolerate warfare against civilization's institutions of cultural production. Europeans are just the most tolerant civilization, and as such are the most vulnerable civilization. The Chinese certainly don't. The Hindus don't need to be, but they certainly aren't, and they're getting over their experiment with it. And the Europeans, well, we're ending our experiment with it too. And that's why Antifa, which is white underclass, BLM, which is black, the SPLC, which is Jewish, Islamism, which covers the entire South Eurasian race, the Chinese fascist or East Asian peoples are uniting against Europeans because we are tolerant to a point that's now past, and that tolerance will continue to decline, and intolerance will increase as the World War II generation passes from the earth. Now, fascism, or total war in defense of the institutions of cultural production, is the regular status of all civilizations in history. In other words, fascism, total defense against total warfare by competitors, well, that's the norm in political history. The only difference being that fascism occurred during the Industrial Revolution, which freed the laboring classes from subsistence farming and made possible their participation, for once, in the consumer economy and in non-subsistence consumption, and in literacy and social and political participation. Well, gypsies were tolerated during this process. Jews were tolerated. Muslims could never be tolerated. But all three of these groups practice parasitism. They're not innovators, not producers, not discoverers, but consumers. In the case of Islam, they consumed and destroyed the arts, letters, technology, institutions, culture, and even genetics of every great civilization of the ancient world, reducing them to ignorance, superstition, dysgenia, familism, tribalism, and internal poverty. And this destruction of civilization is the mission of the left. The entirety of the left's anti-European, anti-self-determination, anti-sovereignty, anti-reciprocity, anti-market, anti-scientific, anti-civilizational, and dysgenic revolution consists of a war against Darwin's explanation for the success of Western civilization using our rule of law and meritocracy to continue natural selection, producing soft eugenics against the underclass accumulation of genetic, behavioral, social, and political load. So the reason the far northern Far East and the northern Far West achievement is as much to do with the reduction of the dead weight of the bottom classes, enabling middle class majority manners, ethics, morals, truth before face, and technical knowledge, as it is to the tendency of Europeans to compete by status, or for status, by adversarial accomplishment in every conceivable field. But the left, including Antifa and BLM, and the majority of the academy, the leftist activists, and the media, have conducted a systematic, organized campaign of total war against Western civilization for more than a century by hatred of Western civilization, white people meaning, as a proxy for hating the universe, meaning God, because Western civilization is systematically evolutionary and genic, and they're said just demonstrably by their behavior, not by our choice, but by their demonstrated behavior, unfit for advanced civilization. And as a competitive strategy, they seek to drag all civilization down to their dysgenic and dysfunctional level in a crab bucket strategy of survival by preventing the continued evolution of their betters, where their betters are empirically identified by conformity to the laws of the universe and Western civilization or whiteness that discovered, adapted to, and applied these laws for man's benefit. Whiteness, meaning Western civilization, is just science. That's what it means. The discovery, adaptation, and application of physical, natural, and evolutionary laws. They're laws of the universe. They're not escapable. So hating whites and white civilization is just a revolt against European civilization. Whiteness and whites is a proxy for hating the universe and the universe's God for the long history of the failure of one's ancestors and yourself. And instead of seeking to cooperate and ameliorate those differences, as we did in our history of combining adversarial competition with Christian love and charity, instead of integrating into that, by nothing more than trading limiting immigration and reproduction in exchange for redistribution, the left seeks to repeat the tragedy of the Jews and Muslims and Christian Dark Ages and drag us all into destruction, decline, and dysgenia as the hatred of and rebellion against the universe and the Europeans who alone discovered and applied its laws. Now there's no possible means of defeating the universe. You can't defeat entropy. There's no way to cheat without stealing from others. There's no producing devolution and dysgenia as a consequence. Markets continue natural selection. We live by the rule of law of self-determination, by a reciprocal warranty of individual sovereignty and reciprocity in display, word, and deed. Then that limits us to markets in all aspects of life. And we seek to prevent violence, theft, fraud, free riding, rent-seeking, privatization of commons, socialization of losses, conspiracy, corruption, and political power that could be used to violate those markets. Or we do not defeat the Red Queen, and we continue like Judaism and Islam to reverse evolution, reverse knowledge, reverse science and technology until the next geological event once again nearly wipes us from the face of the earth. Or we can continue the European tradition, regulate the reproduction of the unproductive, punish the heck out of the global financial parasites, and make a heaven of this world and every other we can reach. However, we can't, under reciprocity, deny one another the right to self-determination by self-determined means. If we do, then we license the defeat, conquest, and even genocide of those who refuse that reciprocal exchange. So the only reciprocal solution is separation, and to restore the rights standards of behavior that demonstrate one is fit for survival given the laws of the universe and the necessity of the continuous evolution of man, or we war until one side defeats the other because that's the only choice possible. Now the right prefers war by the honest means of privation and the male strategy of warfare, and the left prefers war by the incremental undermining by the use of seduction using false promises, the female strategy of warfare. Now the right's willing to separate if the left is also, and if we can work that out, then maybe we can, and the left can go their way and the right will go their way, and markets for behavior will determine the outcome of the left and the right equally, and the left will produce dysgenic favelas and slums as it continues to turn the West into the Middle East one city at a time, and the right will wall the left off and prevent its spread because it's a conceptual, cultural, institutional, and genetic cancer that threatens mankind within the Dark Age, this time of pseudoscience and sophistry rather than the supernatural, occultism, and mysticism. And that'll be the last scientific experiment we ever have to run with the anti-evolution, anti-civilization, anti-truth of the left. And hopefully after that experiment is over, and hopefully man will continue our transcendence into the gods and not fall to the cancer of the left. This argument is true, it's unassailable, and that's why the left fears it. I'm Kurt Doolittle for the Proprietarian Institute.